Good morning and welcome back to the Tech23 Impact Circles. Now, if it's your first time here, a brand new welcome to you. Thank you all for joining today's conversation, Industry Research Collaborations to Grow and Boost Your Business. As is custom, I would first like to acknowledge both the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and the Bunurong and Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation, the traditional custodians of the land where the Slatterys team meets, works, and creates. We pay our respects to the elders, both past, present, and emerging. We're also aware that others are joining today from different traditional lands. So we would like for you to please say hi in the chat and let us know where you're joining from. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Today's conversation will be kindly led by Dr. Megan Sebben, and she's joined by Franki Chamaki, Dr. George Feast, Dr. Sarvnaz Karimi, Vijay Sivaraman, hi Vijay, and Professor Martie-Louise Verreynne. I'd like to make a special shout out before going any further just to our Tech23 sponsors, Transport for New South Wales, Main Sequence CSIRO Innovations Fund, Oz Industry Entrepreneurs Program delivered in partnership with I4 Connect, Addison's, ASX and Stowe, Kern University, Cicada Innovations and Evoke AG for making Tech23 happen. We thank you so much. Hi Rachel, it's lovely to see you here.
Oh, hi Adina, and hello everyone. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you and to especially welcome our contributors who are helping to make these Tech23 Impact Circles happen. Now in its 13th year, Tech23 takes pride in celebrating Australian innovation and is all about amplifying the people and organisations chipping away at the big challenges we face. So I want to thank you all for being part of this Tech23 Impact Circle. As Adina said, say hello and introduce yourselves in the chat. And you're also welcome to comment and ask questions in there as well. The link to the Slatterys Charter is also found in the chat. And this is a guide to the behaviour that we welcome at all of our events. There are lots more Tech23 Circles planned, so please check those out. And there's recordings of all of the past ones for you to have a look at your leisure. So please do that and share them far and wide. And please note that today's circle will be recorded. Just confirming that we will be eavesdropping on the conversation, and then we'll move to Q&A, where you're welcome to come off mute and connect and chat with others. But let's get started. I'm very honoured and grateful to the wonderful Megan and look forward to this wonderful conversation. Over to you, Megan, to kick things off.
Thanks, Rachel. Firstly, I just want to start by acknowledging that today I'm joining this meeting from the traditional lands of the Bunurong people, and I would like to pay my respects to elders both past and present, and to elders from other communities who might be joining us here today. I'm really thrilled to be hosting this circle. It's a topic that I'm particularly passionate about, and I know that there's some great stories to be shared here, some great learnings as well. So I want to kick off today firstly by asking Franki if maybe you can share a little bit with us about firstly, your experience, your company, and how Hivery has managed to leverage research to impact your business.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Megan. So, well, firstly, Hivery, for those that know, we're about 6.5 years, 7 years old startup, and we focus on retail and applying machine learning and operations research in the field of for retailers and CPG. Now, obviously, I would say at least 20% of our people actually have PhDs in research in particular areas. And we're always interested in seeing new talent join the company or work with new talent. So we tapped into we have a couple of solutions, but two in particular that we used industry research and collaborated together with CSIRO, Data 61 teams and some universities in order to get this up and running. The first product that we wasn't the first product, but one of the first products we engaged the research department research candidates in collaboration was around this search engine trade promotion tool. we used a grant, Innovations Connections, to help us facilitate for that. I believe they attribute, you have about 130K of available funds, and it's a dollar matching. So in this case, we tapped into a research placement, and that person actually was from Australian National University, which actually was doing a PhD in a similar area. So it was a great fit. So we worked with this talent for about 6 months or so, and he actually ended up joining the company, as well as developing this particular machine learning. It wasn't machine learning, it was applied mathematics, so operations research model optimization. The second example was around category management. So we use sort of optimizing assortments and plans for retailers. And so basically like a recommender system. So there we tapped into like a graduate placement, which he also ended up joining the company after a few months. So basically what I'm saying here really is it's been a great way to not only solve the business problem at hand, bringing new innovation and novel approach to developing a new value proposition, but also it's helped secure and bring talent to the companies that otherwise wouldn't have, joined a large corporate. Once like nothing wrong with that. Just we'd rather have talent. They want to wings in companies like Hivery. So I can get in more detail if there's any questions, but there are two examples that we use the research in tapping into research, external research to help us, accelerate our commercialization of our products.
Thanks, Frankie. I might use this opportunity to throw to Vijay, because you're also joining us as a startup founder, and it'd be great to hear maybe what your experience was. And in particular, I know you've got some specific experience in the United States as well. So it would be great to hear maybe a bit of a comparison about your learnings from both places.
Indeed. Thanks, Megan. And really good to hear your story, Frankie. I think there's a few parallels with mine as well. So just in terms of my own background, I got my PhD at UCLA in California. And even during my PhD, it was funded by Bell Labs in those days, Lucent Technologies. So I used to split my time between Bell Labs and university. So kind of got to see both sides, not just the ideation and the development of the fundamental mathematics and modeling behind the work, but also how it's actually being used in practice when building a product. And then after graduation, I joined a startup in Silicon Valley, and again got a taste of trying to kind of bridge the gap between some of the academic research and how it's applied in industry. And then thereafter, I moved to Australia, and that's been one of my passions, trying to bridge this gap between academic research, which often tends to go off and do its, people go off into their rabbit holes and solve problems that nobody's necessarily very interested in, but just out of curiosity, and what industry does in terms of solving real problems, but may not have had the luxury or the time to actually explore it in a lot of depth, because they just, there's day-to-day battles to fight when you're working in a company. And so I believe there is a lot of benefits to be had from that interaction between research, so to speak, and practice. And I've definitely found, at least, during my stay in the US, even during my PhD and thereafter, there was actually a fair bit of pull from industry as well on the research that was happening in academia. And I found that there are some sweet spots. I mean, especially when there is something new and disruptive that is starting to happen. And examples could be the, cloud computing, could be artificial intelligence and machine learning. It could be software-defined networking, which is kind of my area, where the network is starting to get more and more softwareized. So these are fairly disruptive movements. They change the way organizations work and think about their business. And in the early days, there's a lot of nervousness, given the risk is extremely high to adopt this technology, because there's a very well-established process industry has been working towards, and then suddenly everything has to be disrupted. And it could be as simple as what may sound simple, like moving your things off to the cloud, but it completely changes the workflows in your organization. The ability to apply machine learning and AI to the way the workflows happen in the organization, or to the way that telecommunications networks are run, which is my area. So with these disruptive kind of movements, we often find academia has a bit of a head start, because I suppose they have the luxury to look out of the window and think about how the world could be 10 years from now, which is not quite a luxury in industry. And because of that, and because the incentive schemes are aligned in a way that you can pursue blue sky kind of thinking, they often take the plunge, and they do these things with students, as I myself have done with many, many PhD students and honors thesis students. You do a bit of blue sky work because there is no such thing as failure. The worst case that will happen is your idea doesn't really get too much traction, but that is by no means a failure in research. In research, the point is to just explore, and there will be many dead ends. We all know there's 90% of your ideas are probably dead ends, but somebody has to go through to the end of that dead end and confirm that it's a dead end. And research and academia in particular is a very good place to do that, because there is no such thing as failure. I think that is where industry could best leverage academic research, is pursuing these new and disruptive technologies where it is inevitable you will make lots of mistakes, lots and lots of mistakes. And that's extremely expensive in industry, because you're paying people a full-time job. You've got, shareholders to keep happy and investors to keep happy and so on. Whereas in academia, you actually have that freedom to explore these. And in academia, once you figure out what the dead ends are and what actually works, what's the 10% that actually works, you can translate that industry much more quickly with much lower risk, right? So that's kind of, I find, a sweet spot where industry and research from academia in particular can collaborate. These more disruptive kind of technologies, figuring out the dead ends, figuring out the ecosystem, and figuring out what is ready to be adopted into the industry. And sometimes it does need a little bit of longer term thinking. It can't be like, here's a project in 6 months, show me a product that I can actually put on the market. It's the time cycles are a little bit longer than that. But I personally think in the long term, there's huge benefits there. Something that I've found that in the US, they encourage quite a lot. I mean, I've done projects for Google. I was funded by Lucent and so on, which I really do think in Australia, we could also try to adopt that model a bit more to increase the engagement. So Megan, I hope that wasn't too long an answer to your question, but I do hope that helped.
No, that's great, Vijay, and I think provides a nice little segue to maybe bring Sarvnaz into the conversation. Sarv, you're working with a research organisation, and so focusing, I guess, on the academic side of things, but at the same time have had quite a bit of experience working with industry, and in particular small to medium businesses. We were meant to have Simon join us from Lease Info today. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it, but I'm wondering if maybe you could provide sort of an alternative point of view here from the perspective of a researcher engaging with these sorts of projects. What benefits does that actually have to you as a researcher to work on these sorts of projects? And maybe a few comments on how you can make them work better or more efficiently.
Sure. Hi, this is Sarvnaz. I'm a senior scientist at CSIRO, Data 61, and I'm from a language and social computing team. Our team is focused on mostly natural language processing and search and information retrieval. And that's my background as well. So I've been in this research area for quite a while. And yeah, so in terms of research, obviously we are in CSIRO, so we do research in some areas that are the focus of basically our business unit, but also we look at industry as well, and what is out there that could be applicable out there, and it's actually interesting to see. For me, if I do something, I like come up with some algorithm or come up with some system that could be interesting for the industry, it adds impact. So I'm interested to see what we develop over months and years gets taken up and have some impact outside our little world. That is just it's not just the paper that we publish and obviously that's interesting to me. I like to write papers. I like to go to conferences and present and to my peers. But I think the more time passes, I see more value to see that my work is taken up outside world and have something, you know, somebody uses it and somebody benefits from it rather than just the academic research that we do.
Yeah, thanks, Sarv. I think the next perspective I'd like to get is from you, Martie-Louise. I know you've worked with CSIRO recently on a report that I'll let you do a much better job of describing and explaining. But we've heard some specific experiences here, but the work you did actually surveyed, I believe, 800 SMEs. So I'm wondering if you could give some big picture perspectives for us on the state of the industry, or the state of Australia's ability to facilitate these sorts of interactions.
Thank you, Megan. So as you said, I come to this whole issue of how business and researchers collaborate with 3 hats on. In the first place, I'm a researcher who collaborate with business. I'm also a research administrator, and the one that I want to talk about first, as you asked, is how we study this relationship between business and industry. And like you said, at the end of last year, George and I surveyed 800 small businesses, of which 400 had actually collaborated with universities and research institutes. And our report, which you said, have many findings, but there's 3 things that I want to focus on. The first thing is that good relationships are multi-layered, and collaborative research is supported by many things like internships, workshop activities, opportunities for profile raising, and many more. And I think our first 2 speakers talked about that already. And in addition, relationships often mature over time, and more complex activities get added as time goes by. So in other words, while exposure is really helpful and provides a really good starting point, as researchers and universities, we really need to provide opportunities for collaborations that consist out of activities that can support the goals of our partners. And the second thing that was really clear from our findings is that trust and mutual commitment between both parties are as important as open conversations on shared expectations in terms of speed of work, outcomes that you want from it, and the like. And then the third thing is that incentives such as grants are really important, but underpinning that is the connection that is made, and that often happens through a facilitator. So it helps these facilitators and connections help businesses to navigate how to get into universities or research institutes and how to make the relationship work. So just to finish off that thoughts, it was really quite surprising for us to learn just how many businesses entered collaborations to innovate through research rather than for teaching and other purposes, as I think we have thought for a really long time in Australia, and that quite often they received unexpected benefits from this, such as access to market and cost savings and things that were a little bit out of what they went into the relationship for. So I'm really keen to explore these ideas today with everyone here. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you. So George, you're working with CSIRO and the SME Collaboration Nation. It's a great title. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And also, we've talked about the types of collaborations and how beneficial they are, but what support is out there to actually facilitate these collaborations? I mean, how does a startup or an SME go about approaching this, particularly if resourcing or finances, et cetera, are challenging?
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Megan. Yeah, as you said, I work in the SME Connect team. Point of disclosure, with Megan, actually, at CSIRO, and I look after a program of work that is all targeted at doubling the number of small to medium-sized businesses that work with publicly funded R&D. You know, it's not about kind of working with CSIRO, we're interested in startups and SMEs working with CSIRO, with universities, with other research institutes in Australia. And we have a number of different projects or things that we're working on that are trying to boost those things. And we look at this in 3 different ways. So first of all, we have the kind of amplification. So looking at the kind of programs that are already out there in the ecosystem and kind of boosting them. And a few of them were mentioned earlier on by Franki and by Vijay that are there to specifically help one business work with one researcher, and they come with dollar match funding. And by coincidence, we actually look after some of these programs within the team that Megan and I are in at CSIRO. So I think Franki mentioned Innovation Connections. So this is a really great federal government funded program that provides dollar match funding to do that research project. It's very industry led. You know, you have a particular problem, and our facilitating team, which is great that Martie-Louise mentioned the facilitators, will help you connect in with researchers that are best suited to your business. So, you know, look for local researchers or across the country, ones that can help with the problem that you really want solving. And we have a team of 20 facilitators all around the country. So there's always someone local for people to connect into. You know, there's a free service. We can help connect with those people and they can find you some research expertise. Also in particular is our Kickstart program, which is a CSIRO program that Megan actually is the manager of. This is specifically for startups. We've had loads of Tech23 companies go through this in the past. Vijay is one of them. And Sarvnaz was discussing Leasinfo. They've also been through this process. Again, this is really to help startups access R&D. And this is a CSIRO program in particular, but we would love to be able to expand that out to universities as well when the opportunity comes. And we also look at other kinds of programs that help SMEs understand why they would want to be working with R&D in the first place. So, you know, it's all well and good having these stories now that people are discussing, saying, oh, yeah, it's great, we got all this stuff out of it. But it's at the end of the day, it's a business decision. And we've been developing a program called Innovate to Grow, which is an online experiential learning program to help startups and small businesses who have a clear business idea make that next step to do R&D and work out why they would want to do it and provide those connections. And we're actually at the moment advertising for businesses in the agri-food space. So if you are working in that area and you're interested in R&D, then please log on to our website. Someone's chucked it in the chat, which is great, and we can connect you up. We're also, and part of that extra work is the work that we did with Martie-Louise and RMIT, because we're really keen to identify what those barriers are, and a lot of them have been discussed. We try and work with our partners in state governments and universities to kind of lower those barriers. And I should also say there are plenty of other schemes around that are state specific, particularly if you're in New South Wales. I really encourage you to look at New South Wales tech vouchers right now, because that's a really great program that a lot of people will be eligible for. And again, everything we try and do is just make better connections between the programs that are already out there. So I hope that was a whirlwind tour, Megan. And obviously, if people have any questions, stick them in the chat.
Yes, definitely. Please reach out to George if you are interested in any of those programs that are mentioned. I've dropped some links in the chat so you can find out a bit more about them specifically, or perhaps if it's a university collaboration in the Innovation Connections program is of interest, there's some further detail there as well. I want to come back to you, Franki, because you mentioned about a series of projects that you've worked on collaboratively utilising some of these schemes. But I'd love to know, where are you now? What happened since those collaborations? You mentioned acquiring some new staff from those projects, which is fantastic. But what other sort of growth opportunities do you feel have arisen since those projects?
Yeah, I mean, it's been, well, as like, you know, research is never ending. Especially if you try to talk to a project manager, they don't get it. So I need a major project and we're like, yeah, we're still researching. But nevertheless, so the one, I mean, we have 2 of the products are commercialized, but like any startup, that startups don't fail because of starvation, they fail because of gluttony. And so what I mean by that is that we need to be really focused. So while we have those 3 products, it's one in particular, the category management one that I mentioned, that we also got a graduate placement to help out with, that is scaling in North America. And we've signed up big brands, big labels. So you name it, the likes of Coca-Cola, the Walmarts, and so forth. We've signed them up on our solution. Now, we would estimate that product will generate, at least in additional revenue for those companies that we're working with, another $1 billion US of new incremental value revenue generating from optimizing assortment at a hyperlocal level. So, so that category management solution I'm referring to is called Hivery Curate. And so now the graduate that joined through our collaboration is now really, he's spearheading other innovations within the product, you know, the ability, things like demand transfer, often called demand transference, which is a concept in retail where it's like cannibalization in a way. What's the incremental impact to a category or a line of categories if you introduce a new product? What would happen? So our customers, your Mars, your Unilever, those and the retailers, the Krogers, the Targets, typically North America, because 80–90% of our revenue is overseas, are interested in knowing if they're optimizing their assortments in the shelf space. So when I talk about this, I'm talking about, I mean, if you walked into a retail store, make it real. If you were to go to, if you can travel, and if you go to Arkansas, if you go to, and you walk into a Walmart store and you walk down to the beverage aisle, that beverage aisle for carbonated drink is being optimized by Hivery technology. And that technology came through Australia, and that technology has been birthed or collaborated with technology or talent in Australia. So that graduate placement, he can now walk, our talent, so that our staff can walk down the aisle knowing that he actually made that happen. So quite a powerful stuff. So that's your question, and long story short, we continue to scale the solution. In fact, we've now boosted up our US office, excuse me. So we have now about 20 or so people in sales and analytical consultants and customer success teams to actually support the growth in our solution in North America. So like I said, I mean, and it takes innovation to keep in front of competition. And so it's important to go back and always understand what the customers need. And also, given that we're from a data science perspective, it's important to highlight also that a lot of our customers deal, you know, they're in the industry for years. They're in, you know, 30, 40 years in retail and retail. And so when we come up with a solution to a problem, we come from a data science perspective. So, so it's our role to actually smash those industry dogmas of what can be done, what can't be done. And it's through research and getting our data scientists to come in and say, well, this is the problem. How can we solve it from a data-driven approach? Which has been refreshing, to be honest. A lot of our customers couldn't see that, you know, developing this type of technique that we have in a solution to stimulate basically strategies in retail and then optimizing and then generating planograms for that stimulation live. They have never come across this kind of concept. So yeah, so hoping we're approaching, like I said, over $1 billion in terms of additional revenue for our customers, and I think we'll continue to grow. Not think, we will continue to grow our customer base and the customers' revenue.
Thanks, Franki. Talking about innovation and new ideas and where sort of these challenges where we're going to be driven to use technology. I want to ask you, Sarvnaz, you're at the forefront of a lot of research, attending conferences, hopefully face-to-face again sometime in the near future. From your perspective, working in sort of the AI, natural language processing space, I'd love to hear what technologies you think will be solving the problems of tomorrow. Do you have any predictions on growth areas for innovative companies?
Difficult question, Megan. I really don't know what exactly, but from where I see it as in terms of natural language processing, whatever problem that could have some textual data or data that is hidden in text and could be mined or leveraged if it was taken advantage of, like, you know, from the if you put NLP in, and you could take that information out of the textual data. That is something that I can see more and more to be used in my side of the world. We work in a lot of healthcare problems that are more and more are taking advantage of NLP as well, and also whatever is developed in the AI world. Now we're seeing more multimodal systems coming along, so text and image. I'll see, like, you know, for example, radiologists are very interested in this area. Sometimes we get contacted by radiologists themselves, which is interesting to see if we can make a solution for them to take some load off their work, and that's basically taking some of the work that is now in getting to the maturity. It wouldn't be possible 5 years ago, but maybe now is in a state that we could take it, you know, within a couple of years could be used in that space as well. So I could see anything that has text in it, like the work we did for Leasinfo some years back. It basically what we did, we worked with them to, they had a lot of textual data in PDF documents, and they couldn't, you know, all they were doing, there were a lot of manual processes, and we helped them to basically automate that. So yeah, a lot of that sort of work could happen in the future. Yeah.
You heard it here first, everyone. Thanks, Sab. Vijay, I'm hoping to get to all of our participants with this question, but do you have any lessons or learnings that you could share with new players, someone who's contemplating reaching out to a research organisation to see if they can help solve some of their company's business or technical challenges? What sort of advice do you have, and maybe can you draw on any situations where you had to overcome something that wasn't going so well during that time, and you know, can we benefit from some of your past experience?
Yeah, thanks, Megan. I think, yeah, that's a good question, fairly broad. So, I mean, I think, as I said, in research, one of the things, you know, we have the luxury to explore is all those dead ends, right? And that's something that I think industry can really benefit from, especially when it comes to some of the newer technologies. And I'll give an example and a bit of a plug for my own company as well, and what we do, which is that we analyze network traffic that's on the internet, right? And if you, as a consumer, I'm sure all of you are using your broadband connection right now. Imagine if you get stutters on this Zoom call, or you're watching video and you get a spinning wheel, or you're playing a game and you get a lag spike, right? And we all know, and if you have teenage kids like I do, you know what a lag spike means. It's the atmosphere gets very dense in the house with kids being blocked out of games. If they get lag spikes, the games actually disconnect them and they can't play for half an hour or so. So it can get pretty painful. And yet nobody seems to understand why there is a problem, right? Everybody is just frustrated. Oh, it doesn't work. Are you doing something? Dad, is your Dropbox syncing? All this thing going on in the house. And seriously, I mean, as network operators, really, you should be knowing what's happening in the network for sure, right? And it's not, and we're showing that it is possible just by analyzing how, let's take Netflix, transfers video in chunks on your network. We can actually, just by looking at the traffic and without looking inside any encrypted data, like it can all be encrypted, but just the behavior of the traffic tells you if Netflix is healthy or not. Because if it's not, it panics, it does a few things. We pick up all these behaviors. And this was something that, you know, is kind of, academics have known it for a long time. We have written lots of papers on how Netflix behaves and various other things behave, but industry somehow hasn't picked it up. And if you look at the industry frameworks, it's all about measuring speed. Hey, my broadband is 50 megabits, yours is 100. You know what, 5G is coming and I'm getting 250 megabits per second. I mean, our question is, do you really care? I mean, Netflix doesn't need anything more than a few megabits per second. Does it really matter if you have a 50 meg or 100 meg or a 250 meg? Is it just something to upsell you when you don't really need it? So the point is, as an industry, we're not measuring experience because we said, oh, that's too tough. Let's just measure speed. And everybody's competing on speed. So I think this requires a full industry refocus. It's a pretty massive job because everybody's mindset is all around speed, speed, speed. That's all they talk about. And this is where I think working as, I'm obviously also an academic professor, I've been writing a lot of white papers in this space, but working with industry and industry starting to see there is some value in this. And not just that, it can actually be done. Using machine learning, we can actually train data-driven models that can look at the behavior of traffic on the network and actually tell you if this Netflix is behaving well or not. And that would be much more useful if a consumer calls in and says, I'm having problems with my Netflix. If the operator looks at this and says, oh, yeah, I can see your Netflix was glitching here because, you know, you had a Dropbox going at the same time or something, rather than saying, just reboot everything and try again, right? Which is the kind of answer we get after being on a support call for half an hour or kept on hold. So those are kind of the things that I think in research and academia, people have actually thought about for lots of years. But the challenge is translating it, asking the right question, getting the right engagement model. Now, getting back to your question, I think we can, and sorry, I took a while to come to it, is that engagement model has to be looked at. And I'm not sure if there is a generic kind of easy model. It very much depends on what are the motivations of the researcher, right? And you know, aligning that with the interest of the industry. Starting with something small, but building up a relationship, building up the skills so that you kind of, I mean, nobody wants to start with a first relationship being a 3-year project, right? Which is what a lot of academics I've seen. They come and say, well, unless you give me funding for a student for 3 years, I can't work with you. And I see 80% of the relationships just break on day one, because if you approach an industry saying, I want a 3-year commitment, that's like, yeah, get married. You know, it doesn't happen on the first date, right? You got to date, you've got to build a relationship. So there are things that I think can be small, can be low risk, and where there is a benefit for both parties. It's a small step, and you're not solving the world's problems, you're not boiling the ocean, but it's a small confidence building exercise. But the long-term returns are immense, because the companies I've done projects for Google, Cisco, HP, Optus, you know, NBN, and a whole bunch of others. We start with a small project, might be 6 months, might be, you know, whatever, 50K less. But then over the years, we do repeat projects, and then they get more substantial. And students get trained. And once you create a pipeline of talent, it's so much easier to get going on a project and actually deliver an outcome much more rapidly. So I think these are little things that really help in building that relationship and a bit of trust from both sides. But the long-term gains are pretty significant. Did I answer everything you asked for, Megan? Or
yeah, no, that's great. And I know that there's a few thoughts churning here, but I'm going to throw to George, because I'm sure you've got something to add to this one.
Yeah, well, actually, I was going to jump straight in, but then I might pass on to Martie-Louise straight away afterwards, because everything that Vijay was saying about the relationship building is exactly what we found in the work that Martie-Louise was leading. I won't jump in over that, but you know, one of the recommendations was around doing those small entry-level projects, and that's what I guess what we've been trying to do in our SME Connect team at CSIRO with those individual companies. Is, you know, it's impact comes from doing something longer term. You can't just, you know, you're not just going to go into some full-scale collaboration licensing agreement for some technology on day one. It's better to do those smaller projects for both sides to develop the trust. It's not just, yeah, that one-way thing. Because, and you know, and if it doesn't work out, it shouldn't also mean that you shouldn't work with R&D again. It just may be the relationship with that particular researcher or that business isn't the right thing for you, but there will be other opportunities for it. I don't know, Martie-Louise, you want to? I guess there's those particular relationship bits, so you're better qualified to talk about it than I am.
I'm not sure that I would say that, but I think you're both right. So it's all about matching, and how do we make those matches? And because what we're talking about here is creating a partnership. I mean, we've got partnerships in many aspects of our lives, and we sort of know how to create them in other parts, but it's a little bit more difficult when two parties who come from such different places, like academics and businesses, have to create this match. It's a little bit of a Venus and Mars thing going on here, but we've seen so many places where it's worked beautifully, and where these relationships are long lasting, they're creating benefit for both parties. And these are the ones that we were really interested in to see what they were doing right to make that happen. And I mean, I've got a list this long, and this is the next work that we're doing is what are all these things that make the different parties ready to actually work with each other. But just to look at a few things, I mean, there has to be mutual benefits. Both parties have to understand what these mutual benefits have to be. And in my own work with business, I've found it really helpful is to actually say upfront, what's my KPIs, what's your KPIs? Let's look at those things, and let's make sure that we accommodate all of that in building this relationship. Like George is saying, trust is something that's not instantly there. It develops over time. And the way that it develops is by doing these little experiments, little small projects, so that you can build trust and start to work on the bigger things. Just jumping into a big project from the start, it's much more complicated to do that. But then, as an academic, I can tell you we're not that weird. We're actually quite normal people, and we can actually adapt. We can work fast, and we're not all slow. And we can understand that as businesses, you have commercial things that you have to deal with. And as academics, if we want to work with you, we have to recognize that, and we have to make sure that those commercial outcomes from you that you need are happening at the same time that our academic outcomes that we need are happening. And I mean, we can put our academic background outcomes a little bit on the back burner sometimes, whereas the business ones are more immediate. Sometimes it's the other way around. It's just a matter of having that really open conversation, the flexibility to adapt, and being really, really important is just that initial matchmaking. And that's where I was talking about the facilitators or someone who can help with that matchmaking. It also means that both parties, business and academics, have to put themselves out there to say, I've got a problem, is there someone who can solve it? Or I think I've got an idea that I want to work on, which business is interested in working with me on it? I mean, we have to put ourselves out there to actually make that connections happen.
I imagine the facilitator can help with establishing that trust that we spoke about as well, in building those relationships. So this question's still for you, Marty, but everyone else on the panel, please jump in with your opinions too. I want to know two things. What are we doing well, and what could we be doing better?
I actually think we're doing much better than what it looks like from the outside. I mean, if you think about how the government puts research out there that say only 5% of small businesses or businesses collaborate with universities, it's actually gone up. It's closer to 10% now. But if you think about that number, if 10% of businesses are collaborating with universities, we're talking about 190,000 businesses in Australia. Yeah, and if you then look at how many academics you have, there's actually a lot of relationships happening there. So it's not that we are doing so badly. It's in terms of doing the collaboration, it's more about how we repeat those collaborations and how we make sure that those collaborations lead to something that's of value for both parties. And I think that's really the bit where we can still work and where we can improve is that way that it becomes really natural for academics and businesses to work together. That it's not a big thing that we have to say, come on, people, get work together. It's just, I've got a problem. Let me look at where I can find a solution of that problem. And if I cannot find it with the people that I usually work with, who else is out there? And let me be open-minded about it, and vice versa. I think that's really the bit where we still need to put work in Australia more generally.
Yeah, can I add in terms of what we're doing well, or maybe better, I don't know, depending on who you are and what perspective. But and then maybe it's tap into those, and George mentioned this, tap into those facilitators, because it's hard to navigate. Like a lot of people don't know we have these grants and, you know, these collaborations and how to, it is complicated and it can be complicated. But once you're in it and you're doing it, it's like, okay, it's not that bad. So we have people like, you know, we have a consultant, a facilitator from the entrepreneur department, industry, Australian Industry Department of Industry, sorry, that helps us facilitate this. And Peter, his name, is great. He's fantastic, and he's been great throughout the journey. And I mean, when I say journey, it's been a few years. So those online are looking, well, okay, thank you guys for this thing. Well, how do I start? How do I tap into it? Well, there are facilitators, and I'm sure that George can talk about this more in detail. But just saying that that's really been helpful for us from Hivery perspective.
Yeah, sorry, but thanks, Frankie. I was actually just trying to find, we have the list of the names of our facilitators and where they are, because they're really happy to kind of chip in. And I guess the other thing that, because the facilitators in our team, you know, while they're CSIRO employees, they're basically contractors to the Department of Industry, Industry, as Frankie was saying. So, you know, there's no CSIRO agenda. It's always about, you know, finding that right R&D, really connected in with the universities, particularly in their local areas, because, you know, they've done a lot of projects with them. And I'll put the links to the names in the chat in a second. And the great thing is that our team, and, you know, I'm involved in this and Megan's involved in this, we send those information to each other as well to expedite that process. Because, you know, Frankie, we were saying that it's, you know, there's a lot of grant programs, there's a lot of things, you know, there are a lot of grant programs that we don't have access, we don't help facilitate, but we know the people who we can send you to do it for you. And it's all about that, just making it easier. And it's our job, basically, you know, so we're already being paid to do it, so you don't have to. Come and speak to someone, and we'll find the right people for you.
Fantastic. Thanks, George. I wonder, from a different perspective, Sarvnaz, if a company wanted to engage with you or your team, do you have any pieces of advice or challenges that you've personally experienced? I know we've spoken before about sometimes language, and our understanding of what a term means for a business might not be the same as what we're familiar with, or in a research sector. So I'm wondering if you have any advice for a new company that wanted to, say, work with your team, and how they would prepare, or what they could do to support that.
Yeah, so yeah, it sometimes can be challenging given we all use different terminologies in our world, and maybe the companies. But I don't know what to say, but it's sometimes difficult to understand what the problem is that the companies want to be solved, and sometimes they expectations can be like, you know, come and solve everything in one go, that we can't do. If it's, for example, if it's a Kickstart, if it's a 6 months project, for example, there's so much can be done. So I think I would appreciate if somebody would approach me by having a well-defined problem that they could think that we could tackle, like, and by some machine learning, some natural language processing, search, what we can offer, and we could work with them and define it better, that fits within a short-term project that can be extended later on. But I don't think there's much, you know, there's no barrier. I'm happy always to talk to people and basically discuss with them whether or not our team could help them, or someone else in CSIRO, for example, could be of assistance.
Great. And then maybe just a comment from you, Vijay. Do you have any thoughts on what we're doing well and what we could be doing better?
You mean as a community in Australia?
Yes,
in
yeah,
engagement?
big picture.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
big picture now.
Yeah, look, I'm actually, I mean, I've been in the country since 2003, so about 18 years, and I've actually seen quite an improvement over the last few years in particular. I think there's a few things. One is we're getting successes. I mean, having software companies like Atlassian and Canva and all starting to become, big unicorns. Immediately everybody's saying, hey, you know what, not everything needs to happen in the Valley. And frankly, when I first came, I found that the biggest difference I found between being in Silicon Valley and here was not that the people there were smarter, but just their level of confidence was just 10 times more. They just have the smallest of ideas and brag about it as if it's the next big thing. And whereas here we are way too humble. We have great ideas, we have great talent, but we tend to be somewhat humble here. I'm glad that confidence is increasing with time as we get more successes locally. I'm also glad that there's more recognition in the community. I think government schemes, CSIROs put schemes in place to encourage more interaction. So I think that is fantastic. So I think we're going in the right direction. I'm very pleased with that. If I were to pick a couple of things, I would say that we could possibly improve. I'd say that let's emphasize, let's try to remove some more barriers. I think intellectual property often gets to be a barrier. A lot of companies start getting really, possessive. I mean, rightly so. After all, intellectual property is a pretty important thing. But if it's like a prenup, right? If on the first date you're going to talk about a prenup, it's not going to go very far, that relationship. I mean, it can be a hindrance, right? So really trying to not worry too much about intellectual property day one, because as it is, we are a small country with less people, and you're fighting against big talent pools in North America and Europe and Asia increasingly. We've got to work together a lot more, and the less the barriers, the better for us. And IP is something I think we could be a bit more relaxed about it, at least in the early stages. And if it's actually looking like it's going to lead to something, maybe at that point, start tightening up the IP. So that's one of those things. And the other thing is I would strongly encourage more, I would even encourage academic colleagues to spend time at companies, working with companies, because one thing I find is companies absolutely see students as a source of talent, but they don't necessarily want to engage with the academics as much. They just want to get straight to the student. The academic is just the person that connects them with the student. And I think academics can offer more than just that. I think academics do spend a lot of time thinking about things which, some of which are useful as well. So trying to make it not just, a company and a student, but company, academic, and student, because that relationship is a longer term and more viable relationship. Otherwise, if an academic is bypassed and it's just about students, then academics have no motivation to engage really. So maybe those are a couple of areas I'd encourage us to think a bit more about is the IP issue and more engagement with the academics as well in research, not just the students.
Thanks, Vijay. I think there's some great comments to finish on. I know I'm feeling very motivated and inspired by what's been shared during this conversation today. It sounds like there's a lot of potential for growth and development of some really innovative ideas and technologies here in Australia. And if we can maximise those opportunities to collaborate and make the best out of those skills and engagement and that massive amount of brain power that we have, then I think that the future looks very bright for Australian innovation and small business. So thank you very much. I'm going to throw back to Rachel now to wrap up Adina, sorry, to wrap up our discussion.
Thank you so much, Megan, and thank you so much, contributors. That was, as you say, a lot of food for thought. Now, what we're going to do now is we'll stop recording and we're going to pop into some little groups just to continue our chat. So anyone who wants to stay on the line, please do. And please do keep in mind other circles that are coming up and past circles as well if you'd like to revisit.